everyone. Welcome to the Change Your Mind podcast, where we explore personal development, spirituality, and science. I'm your host, Kris Ashley. I'm really excited for today's program because we are going to talk about a couple things I'm really passionate about. Yoga. Everyone listening knows I just sold my yoga company back in April, but I'm still passionate about the practice, and quantum physics. So we all know that I geek out about quantum physics. I love backing things up with science, so we're going to do that today. First, a couple quick announcements. Head to the links in the show notes. You are going to find links for my amazing guest. You'll also find a link to my book, Change Your Mind to Change Your Reality. It was endorsed by Michael Beckwith, Bob Doyle, Marcy Shimoff, all of whom were on The Secret. It was endorsed by John Gray, who wrote Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. So go check it out. You'll also find links to my free masterclass, free downloads, my courses, my coaching programs, and my social media so you can stay connected. And finally, this podcast is part of the Los Angeles Tribune Podcast Network. So we are doing a lot in the personal development sphere. Stay connected with us. I just shared a stage with Joseph McClendon. Before that, I was on stage with Dr. Joe Vitale and Sharon Lecter and Mark Victor Hansen. So we're putting on these amazing events. Come be involved. Oh yeah, and also if you want to sponsor the podcast, there is a link to do that in the show notes as well. All right. Hi, I'm Kris. When I was younger, I went through trauma that caused me to feel broken and lost. But my life changed after I had a spiritual awakening. Since then, I've dedicated my life to studying and learning from masters all around the world that have helped me to create a life of fulfillment and abundance beyond my wildest dreams. Now I'm dedicated to sharing everything I've learned so that you don't have to suffer for decades like I did. I've seen people's lives completely transform, and I share it all right here. So with me today, I have Trish Gent. Gent or Gent? I didn't even ask you.
No, Gent, you got it right.
All right, Trish Gent. Trish is an integrative life coach who helps those living in stress and anxiety stop rushing through life. With over 2 decades of experience as a registered nurse, she masterfully blends evidence-based science with powerful spiritual practices to create a holistic approach that harmonizes the body and mind. Trish's proven methodology empowers her clients to reclaim their confidence, trust their instincts, and take charge of their lives with crystal clear direction. So welcome, Trish.
Thank you, Kris, for having me. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, it's my pleasure as well. So I like to start all of my episodes the same way, and that is by asking my guest what their origin story is. So how did you go on this journey from being a nurse to being a yoga practitioner and a life coach and interested in quantum physics and spiritual practices?
Oh, yeah, definitely. And I definitely want to say I'm still a nurse. I am still a nurse, in heart, in license, and the whole 9 yards. And I think that's a big part of my journey as well. So I think in a lot of ways, I think I lived with anxiety my whole life. And it was something I just accepted was part of me, like it was part of my DNA. Also, if anyone was interested in astrology, we all dabbled in it, at least as kids, and maybe got more into it as adults. But, I'm a Virgo. And I remember reading like Virgos were perfectionists. And I'm like, oh, I'm a perfectionist. So I looked at these things and I really just thought that these were traits that I had. I had anxiety, my mind was overthinking, I was a perfectionist, that these were just the way I was. So I think having that mentality, having that thought process, as I continued through life, I was, always a high achiever, and I always loved to learn. I loved being involved. And I started my work as a nurse. I started in critical care and moved over to clinical research. And they both were, high stress, but in very different ways. But I loved seeing the process. I loved, a big part of nursing too is that, especially the doctoral nursing programs is evidence-based practice. And that's something that we've all been very ingrained in doing. And, eventually, I completed my master's and I got into management. And, on the outside, I was doing everything that you're supposed to do. I was checking off all the little boxes. Everything looked like it was fine. I was shifting the units in a positive direction that needed to be done. But truthfully, I was going in and out of adrenal fatigue. I was probably completely burnt out. I was exhausted. And at some point, I'm like, okay, I worked so hard to get here. And I'm sitting here and I'm like, so this is it. I'm just going to keep like climbing up some ladder the rest of my life. And then what? Because I felt like I didn't get this like fulfillment that I thought I was going to achieve or feel once I got to a certain place. So at first I was like, I just need to start exploring different things. And my first thought was like, you know what? I'm so intense and I'm so type A. I'm so hardcore. Maybe instead of my workouts being like a spin class and weights, maybe I need to do something a little bit different. So I tried to do some different yoga practices at home, just with an app. I can't even tell you it was with an actual like person. I think it was like a monkey app or something. And I was trying like the Oprah Winfrey was doing and Deepak Chopra were doing these meditation series at the time, and I was trying to do them as well. And there were two things I distinctly remember during that period of time. One thing was is that whenever I did the yoga practice, at the very end there was a 5-minute yoga nidra, and it took the first minute and a half for them to kind of go through your whole body head to toe. And I knew it took a minute and a half because after that finished, it was so painful for me to lie down. I was so anxious. I was like, oh my God, there's so many things I need to be doing. I can't believe I'm just laying here. And that next, 3.5 minutes of laying there was so painful. And sometimes I couldn't even finish it. So it was just so difficult to sit still. And then another time, I was really trying to do these meditations and I lied down to do the meditation. And afterwards, my husband even said, he goes, you did not even do that meditation. He goes, I literally could see your head spinning the whole entire time. And I'm like, yeah, but at least I tried. At least I did it. Which he's completely right. I wasn't actively meditating, but I did not know how to meditate. And truthfully, I was in the category of, oh, I just can't meditate. One of those things I can't do. Also, looking back, I think I was doing the wrong types of meditation. I was doing these guided meditations, which I think if you have an overactive mind and you're completely dysregulated, probably isn't the one to start with. um, so, pretty much at that point, I was really just dabbling with all these different things for me to try to do. And then one day I was reading Mind Body Green and I came across something about elevating your frequency. I'm like, that's interesting. And I'm like, maybe that's what I need to do. I keep trying to relax my body, but maybe if I elevated my frequency, things would be a lot, easier. And I started watching this video, and it was Guru Jaquette talking about Kundalini yoga, and she's talking about how it's a yogic technology and how it regulates your nervous system and glandular system. And I found it absolutely fascinating because I've never heard of someone talking about yoga like that before. I never heard someone talk about it like it was a system and a technology. I never heard people actively talk about how it was affecting our body in that powerful way, other than, oh, you get a good stretch, or you get a good workout, or you get a good relaxation. So this was very different to me. So I was sitting in my bed and she talks for like 20 minutes and then they're like, oh, we're going to go do some yoga. And I'm like, I could have stopped the video right there, but because I'm one of those people that's like, I start something, I should finish it. I was like, all right, let me just do this. Let me just see what happens. And I didn't even go over onto my yoga mat. I stayed in my bed to try to do it the best I can because I didn't want to lose this like momentum that I had. And I did the practice and there was a meditation afterwards and I finished up and I was like, whoa, like I felt different. I don't even know if I could have put the word to it, but there was a little bit of relief, maybe some calmness. And all I knew from that point forward was I need to know more. So from there, I just started diving in to her and the practices. In about 3 months of me just really dabbling online with it and doing things as much as I could, I was like, all right, I'm going to sign up for teacher training. And now, mind you, I've never done an in person class. um, at all. And I'm literally like, what am I going to do with this? I'm not a yoga teacher. Like, that was not something that I thought was who I was. I was like, I don't have a yoga body. That's not something I could see myself doing. And I'm like, but I need to know more. So, and I just feel like I need to sign up. So I just did it and I signed up for teacher training. From there, I would say the rest is almost still this like work in amazing progress. I finished teacher training, um, and everything in my life started to really shift. And after that, I'm like, okay, I want to know how this works and why this works. And there's got to be something other than just doing tons of Kundalini yoga to help yourself to shift, because that's all I was doing. And eventually I realized that my anxiety dissipated. And once my anxiety really dissipated, I started to kind of view the whole world around me really differently. It was as simple as my husband one day telling me that I looked pretty. And I said, "Oh, thank you." And he almost fell off his chair because he was like, "I've never said that before." I used to always dismiss any compliments and be like, "Oh, no, that's ridiculous." Or, "No, I don't. I'm horrible." And I just said, "Thank you." And I just think that was just one of the small ways that, well, it was small but powerful ways, of how things were shifting in my life, not just internally, but externally. So from there, I was like, "Oof, I need to know more. I need to, I want to know exactly how does this work, and how I could have made this transformation almost in a more streamlined fashion." Because even though I was very clear that it was the Kundalini yoga, there was still a part of me that was kind of throwing spaghetti on the wall. It was just like, it feels good. I'm just going to keep doing it, keep doing it, keep doing it, and just see what happens. Because when I started, I definitely didn't think I was going to shed my anxiety. It wasn't till I shed my anxiety that I realized that that was even possible.
Thank you so much for all of that. There's so much of your story that I resonated with, and just little bits that I want to call out and just put my own commentary on, and just to highlight, because I think that you touched on so many important things that I just want to like reiterate for listeners. The first thing is I just relate to your story so much of why you started yoga. Um, so especially the like so when I first started, I felt so uncomfortable in a yoga studio. I was like, I'm not flexible. I don't have like the perfect outfit. I don't have the yoga body. Like, I don't look like all these women on the cover of like Yoga Journal magazine or whatever the hell, right? Like, and I felt so insecure in so many studios, and the studio I finally landed on was donation based, and it fit like 150 people in the room, and I would literally go into the middle of the room, anonymous in a room full of strangers, like too shy to even like say hi to the teacher at the door, and I would like bawl my eyes out through class. And I would go in when I was having a shitty day, and then it was just like this release, and just for a few moments after in shavasana, I felt like calm, like a noodle. And it was like I went as often as I felt drawn to my mat, and pretty soon that was like 6 days a week. And and your story, like I love that you said, I was just taking notes as you were talking, like you were just, your anxiety dissipated after so much Kundalini. It's almost like you don't even like notice the transition until you look back and you're like, whoa, like this is me now and that was me before. And And I also wanted to call out that you were talking about how like you just felt like you had anxiety, right? Because are you a Virgo? Is that what you said?
Yes.
Yeah. um yeah, like I just feel like, especially in today's day and age, so many people just associate themselves with something like anxiety, and it just becomes this statement that they make: I have anxiety, or I'm an anxious person, and it becomes their identity. And we all know from studying the law of attraction and quantum physics that like what you affirm is your reality, is what stays your reality, what becomes your reality. And the more we affirm like I have anxiety, the more we have anxiety, right? It's like something needs to break that pattern. So I just wanted to call that out for people.
May
Um,
I add to that for one
yeah,
second?
totally.
Yeah, I love that you call that out. The other thing that I thought was really interesting in my story that I look back on is that, one of the mantras in Kundalini yoga we say a lot is Satnam, Satnam. And Satnam means truth. Truth is my identity. And, that's one of those really great mantras that, you can add into anything. You can mentally vibrate it while you're, twisting left or twisting right. You can kind of add that into any like short little set that you're doing. And I remember I was integrating that, into my practice as well, not being clear at the time, right? What that truly meant. Truth is my identity. I'm like, okay. But I think I knew enough knowing that what I was living was not my true identity. And I remember having this aha moment in the shower one day after doing this enough and realizing that, oof, not only did I agree, my anxiety was definitely became my identity, just like the perfectionism was my identity. I also like realized my work was my identity.
Mm,
And I was almost tied so much of myself to like this one aspect and this one thing that I didn't know that there was a whole other world out there of me to explore for me.
I love that. What a great way of saying it. I didn't know there was this whole other world of me to explore. Yeah, that's powerful. Because like of course we all know that there's more to the world than just like our work and our little bubble, but like we are multifaceted and we go through transitions and like you can reinvent yourself as many times as you want, right? And there's we all have this depth, this vastness inside of us. So that's really cool. And it reminds me of like something else you said that I wanted to call out is you said you didn't get the sense of achievement at hitting those milestones that you were told you were supposed to. It's like destination fatigue, right? It's like
Yes.
it's always like trying to get to that destination and then you get there and you're like, okay, well now what?
Yeah, no, that's completely true. I mean, I felt like I did everything right. You know what I mean? I went to college, I got the really good job, I got the degree, I kept getting, good jobs, working my way through, check, check, check. And it was like, okay, but when am I going to get that relief? And I think I actually thought, and it sounds crazy for me to say it now, but I'm hoping other people at least resonate with this insanity that I was thinking is that I was working, working, working so hard my whole life that once I got to this certain level, I'd be able to relax.
Mhm.
And it was like, once I got there, I can relax. And, that's really what I was waiting for. It was like that work hard, play hard. The longer I work, the sooner. And my thought was the harder I work now, I'll get there sooner so I could relax sooner. But then, like, I got to like the first big piece, and I'm like, and probably not the first big piece, but what I thought was like, the final like start. And I'm like, no, I'm more exhausted, more stressed, more burnt out. There's less of me. The only part of my life is now work, nothing else. Like, it's the exact opposite of what I was thinking.
It reminds me of this story. My husband knew this person. Like it was like a acquaintance of acquaintance, but it was this CEO who worked hard all his life and he was young. He was like one of those 40 under 40 and like sold his company super young, like in his 50s or something. Hustled his whole life, worked his ass off, sold his company, exited, went on his first vacation because he had that mindset, I'm going to work now and I'm going to relax later. That's why this is relevant. Like exactly what you're saying. Had a heart attack and died on his first vacation. And it's it just it when you're talking, I'm like, yeah, we need to like come home to ourselves now. We need to find the present moment now, not like once we hit that level. But it's so relatable what you said. Like I've felt that. I feel like everyone's felt that.
Yeah. I'm glad that it's relatable. But at the same time, it's like, oof,
Sad. Yeah.
we're living our lives with this expectation that if we do all these things, this is going to be the outcome. And
Mhm.
so we're in our process of doing that, we're ignoring like everything else that's coming our way because I think if you're like me, you become very tunnel visioned, right? Especially if you want to achieve your goals. You're like, okay, if this is what I need to do to get here, put everything aside, put my blinders on. I'm just going to focus on what's in front of me, put my head down and go. But we miss so much else in that whole process, like any signs that we were getting, to do something else or different. And, you know, you forget like all the things you used to explore as a kid, and it now becomes something that, oh, that was just what I did as a kid, not something I'm into anymore. When really you probably still have that interest in a way. You just haven't explored it in so long, you forgot that part of you.
Totally. And like usually those interests are signs of what your purpose is in life, right? So I went to an Eckhart Tolle conference, I guess, retreat, and he talks a lot about doing versus being, and like he's way too on like the being side. He was saying because he's kind
Mhm.
of funny, and but there's like a balance there, right? And it's like we still need to like serve our purpose and like feel like we're accomplishing things and like serving and giving back and doing and building, but like we also need to like be too, right?
Mhm. Yeah, I think we need to have that, like you said, the word balance, but really we need to have the doing and the being if we want to become.
Hmm. I like
Because
that.
if you're just in the being, you're just going to be, yeah, you're going to be living in that present moment. You're going to be staying right there, but you're not going to be sharing everything that your being gathering to the world. You're just going to be keeping it to yourself. So at some point, I think you're not going to have that satisfaction.
Hmm.
And the doing, well, I think you just heard what happens when we only do the doing.
Exactly.
Please listen to the first part of the episode for that. Um, but the purpose, and like you said, like our purpose in life, I think, is to share our gifts. And in order to share our gifts, we need to be clear on what our gifts are, not what we're told that they're supposed to be.
Mm.
And then we're supposed to, get to know not only our gifts, but us and how do we relate to them and how we put them out there and how we do that doing is what hopefully will make change. And you're bringing your purpose out to the world in that way.
Yeah, and like, do you think that? Well, so one of the things you shared with me in our pre-call that you didn't say on your when you were telling your story is like you were dry heaving every morning.
Oh, yeah, I forgot
Like
that one.
that's how like wound up you were.
Yes, that was. And I actually remember thinking every morning when I was dry heaving that, like, I just need to learn how to manage this. So
Mm.
even then, when it was at like the height, there wasn't like oh, I need to stop, right? Or I need to get rid of this. It was like, no, I just need to learn how to manage it.
So
Like I just
yeah.
need to tame the beast, like as opposed to actually like, I don't need to be living like this.
Or
So
like this isn't
even
healthy. This is
yeah.
a sign that something's not right. So
Oh yeah.
which I guess is like my question. Do you think that like all of this were signs, the anxiety, the exhaustion, the dry heaving, like do you think those were signs that like you weren't on the path you were meant to go on? Or like what was the main lesson that you took away from all of that? Because I think everything happens for like a lesson, right?
Yeah, I do. I think, well, first of all, my nervous system was completely dysregulated. And I still wasn't to the point of realizing that anxiety was a nervous system problem. Especially being in the healthcare field, it was still considered a mental health problem, and I hate to say this, but even in our healthcare populations, and in the hospitals, they would say, do your self-care. And I've talked about this with another friend of mine. Like, yeah, we were legitimately told self-care is like, you know, getting your hair done, getting a pedicure, reading a non-nursing journal, like read a book for fun. That's what we were told. We weren't even told anything about like, okay, let's do things that can regulate your nervous system, that can bring you back to center, that can bring you back to balance. Or at best, they would do like a 2 minute like breathing exercise and call it a day and say that we did our health for the system for the month. So truthfully, it wasn't even a thought that anxiety was a nervous system issue. And with that, forgot where I was even going. But yeah, I mean, does it mean like I was on the wrong path? It's funny you said that because I don't know if I was on the wrong path as much as I was supposed to learn from this to keep going, to bring
Mm.
in another sector.
Yeah.
Um, from that aspect, I do feel like I did do a lot of good and I definitely learned a lot. I still have connections, to people that I worked with in another state, from years and years ago. I did have to, kind of have like a reckoning, and I had to reestablish my relationship with my profession in a lot of ways. So, like I said before, I'm still working, as a nurse right now. And I actually switched out of the hospital base and I went to home care. And I went back to actually taking care of a hands-on patient again, which I didn't do for 8+ years. But I think I needed to, because I need to be like, okay, was I just wrong to be in this profession from the start? Or, were there just some things had to change and I need to view it from a different way? And, now that I've been doing the home care, it's given me a couple things. One, it's giving me the space to continue to explore the other areas of my life and other, areas in my life, other relationships in my life. But it also gave me the opportunity to reestablish and have more of a healthy relationship with my profession.
That all makes total sense. And it goes back to what you were saying where there was a whole other world of you to explore. And it doesn't mean
Mm.
that and I think that's such a great takeaway for listeners actually. It doesn't mean that like reinventing yourself or exploring more doesn't mean that you have to like scratch out and throw away everything that came before it. Like maybe there's a way to integrate this new version or this new information or this new practice. So I appreciate that. So let's talk a little bit more about Kundalini. So like I ran yoga teacher trainings. I taught vinyasa, but
Mm.
with our yoga teacher trainings, we would have Kundalini every session, and we would do a 3-hour Kundalini session on a Friday night from like 6 to 9. And when I first when I first started going to that studio or jumping into TT as a student, I was like, oh, this fucking night. Like 3 hours of Kundalini is so goddamn exhausting. And and I wouldn't sleep after. That was the thing. I was like wired after. I like would not sleep. But what I realized as I like kept doing it, because we would have like 3 TT sessions a year, and then I eventually like sought out Kundalini on my own, is my mind was so clear after.
Mhm.
And it's like something's going on there, right? Like there is some sort of energetic something happening because your mind gets clear, like you get wired, like there's energy moving. Like that's all I have to say. Even though like when you're in it and you're in the freaking pose for so long and you're like I want to kill someone, it's so powerful, and then you learn to like love the process. Or at least that was my experience with Kundalini. So you were talking about the science behind it and how it regulates your nervous and glandular system. So I'd love to talk to you a little bit more about that. And then if people are listening, they're like, what's Kundalini yoga? Maybe just give like a very, very quick explanation of how it differs from like maybe a traditional yoga class.
Oh, sure. Um, and I try to keep it pretty basic, so no one's like having to like look up terms in the dictionary. So Kundalini yoga is known actually as the yoga of awakening, bringing the unconscious into consciousness. So it sounds very magical on the surface, but really, at least from my take, is that the unconscious becomes conscious once we regulate our nervous system. And for me at least, that's what I found is that whole entire process. Because the more you regulate yourself, the more you come back to center, and that's really the big piece of it. What makes Kundalini yoga different is that we do include physical postures, and a lot of the physical postures are grouped together as a set called a kriya. And the kriya is, like I said, a set of postures that's designed for a specific purpose. And many of these have been passed down for, you know, hundreds of thousands of years and have essentially like withheld the test of time. Um, So yes, we have some physical postures, but the physical poses are very, I think they're a little simplistic. I feel like they're simplistic in the sense that you're not, doing headstands. You're not trying to be insanely flexible, which is, I think, why I related to it
Mm.
also so much. I didn't feel like I had to be this flexible person. Um, but with Kundalini yoga, everything is very rhythmic and repetition. So you're aligning your breath with the movement. And I don't mean it's like a flow class where you're like, you're getting into this flow and you're breathing through it. It's more like you are twisting back and forth, and you're doing an inhale with when you twist left and an exhale when you twist right. And we have that rhythmic and that repetition that is continuously going with the breath. Um, Breath work is, I think, included in so many aspects of Kundalini yoga. Um, and on top of it, we do include also a lot of mantra. And the mantra, like I said earlier, an example of that would be the mantra Satnam that I spoke of earlier. You could chant them out loud, but we can also mentally vibrate the mantra as well. So every Kriya that you do, every meditation you do is completely different. Some of them, may not have a lot of mantra, but most of them will have obviously some different poses. Some of them are a very heavy breath work focused. Because like we said, they all have a different purpose. So if you try a Kundalini class and you felt like that wasn't for you, I would always say try again, because you never know what they're gonna work on or what they're gonna do. And you may align to something that they just didn't do that particular day. Because we
Totally.
all have
Like, aren't
things we
there
prefer.
kriyas for like anger or kriyas
Oh
for
yeah.
like what? Yeah.
There's one called fists of anger, and you literally have your hands to a fist, and you do a little like O mouth breath, and you are just twisting back. And when you're doing it, they're like, focus on what you're angry about. And it doesn't look like much, but you do that for like 3 minutes, you will work up a little bit of a sweat. You'll be amazed on how much you can shift things by just using your breath, which is just, I think, unbelievable, because it's something that we have at our disposal 24/7.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for giving that explanation. And I would love for you to talk a little bit about the science behind it. Like, how does it regulate our nervous system and glandular system? And I guess first, it might even be helpful to say, like, what does it mean to have your nervous system dysregulated?
Yes, I think that's a great question. So, when our nervous system, ideally, we want to be, not always, but our nervous system is meant to be flexible, which basically means it tells us what's going on and what we need to do. So if we're in a conversation like right now, we are feeling safe, we're feeling connected, we have that calm sense, that connecting is going and taking place. We don't feel like our guards up. The thing is, with our nervous system, we kind of have, that's like our first line. But our second line of defense is when we go into the sympathetic realm. And the sympathetic is that fight or flight response that we've all heard about. And that's when our heart rate's, beating really high, maybe rapid breathing a little bit more. You could be very tense, because your body's getting prepared, right, to either fight or run away. But when we are living in those states for way too long, and I really think that this is where we start to get into people living in workaholism, perfectionism. I mean, they're really just different forms of different addictions, that they're just addictions that we as a society have decided to praise. In all
Totally.
honesty, that's what they
Totally.
are. Um, but at some point, your body cannot withstand staying in that for a very long period of time. So eventually you start to poop out. And then your body goes to the third line of defense. And the third line of defense is your dorsal state. And that's the state of immobilization. So this is where you see disassociation. your mind separating from your body. You'll see a shutdown where you're immobilized. You'll hear people start to talk a little bit about the freeze state. And that is where you actually have a little bit of the sympathetic and the dorsal. So the freeze is like you have the energy to move inside, but you physically can't move. And you're not ready to take those steps. And a lot of people have been, whether it's due to stress, anxiety, trauma, trauma prolonged over time, have been living, in a disassociation state for a very long time, or people living in the sympathetic state for a very, very long time. And I think when we're living in those states, and I think I was one of those people living in those states, you don't realize that there's something else because it's all you've known for so long. And when you are also in that state, your regulated state, your state of actual like connection, it becomes a very narrow window. So you don't really have a lot of flex to go. So this is when, you get stressed out very easily. You're probably very jumpy. And this is where you kind of see a lot of the control. And I know I had this issue too. Especially with your anxiety, you have this perceived, or you have a lack of perceived control. So you start trying to control everything around you to try to make yourself feel safe. So the goal is to regulate your nervous system isn't to live in this calm, stress-free environment. The goal is that you can bring yourself back to center. And that's, when you become out of center, you know how to bring yourself back if you need to, because the reality is you still may need to know if you need to run. You still may need to know if you need to, fight. But you also need to know, is that threat real? And now how do I bring myself back to that regulated state? And then once we're in our regulated state, how can we increase our capacity or our threshold? So, once you, like I said in the beginning, if you've been living in these states of stress and anxiety and dysregulation, you have a very narrow window. So you probably don't feel that safety that often. But once you start coming back there enough, you start to kind of build that capacity. And building the capacity is actually what it is for you to build your resilience. Your ability to handle more stress is actually your ability to kind of build your own internal capacity within your nervous system.
I think that's the best explanation of dysregulation that I've ever heard. And and the best explanation of how to come back to normal, or quote unquote normal, like a regulated, I guess I should say. And I love that you said, like, when you first come there, the window's so small and you can get set off again in a second. And it makes so much sense. And I'm thinking about myself in the past, or people I know that just get so stressed out and they're so wound up. And it, like, that explanation completely makes sense. And I just appreciate it. And then that leads to other things. Like, I think you mentioned adrenal fatigue earlier, right? Where it's just like your cortisol is so drained from it's like you don't have any left because you're running so high.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And, just to kind of go back, we talked about how it's a nervous Kundalini works the nervous system and the glandular system. Our glands are our hormones. That's our hormonal regulation. So when you hear about women that are so stressed, they start missing their periods, a big part of that is because they've already had this glandular dysfunction occur because their hormones are all out of whack. So I think people heal glands and they're like, "Oh gosh, what is that?" But it's a lot of it's your hormones and how they're working through your body. Your adrenals are part of that as well. You can even throw in your lymphatic system, which is, it's a dependent system that, removes waste in your body in a dependent fashion. But a lot of them are hitting like underneath our armpits. We have a lot of lymph there. And the thing with Kundalini is you do lots of arm movements. And when you think about it, how often are we really lifting our hands above our head? How often are we moving those areas around? So you start to kind of shift things that typically don't get this, we'll say, attention that we typically don't give it when you're sitting in front of a desk all day or you're doing the same repetitive movements.
It's almost like it's flushing it out.
Yes, I do think it is like a nice little flush out for your system.
So as you're talking about glands equal hormones, I remembered that we talked about we both went through an infertility journey. So do you think that that is related to the stress that you were under? Like, was this before finding Kundalini?
Yeah, so I would say our infertility journey started before Kundalini and it did continue, I think, after as well. I think originally, like we all do, I think if we're dealing with any sort of infertility, we're like, how do I fix it? What do I do? And originally, I and my husband, we decided to try some IUI. And I noticed after like the first round, they couldn't, they missed my ovulation, they missed my cycle to, to
Oh, that
get the
sucks.
deed done. I know, right? And the thing was, I was always regular, like clockwork. So when that happened, and this was before cleaning leaning, I was like, I went on all these meds and all these pills, and I have not. I've been regular, like clockwork, since like the day I got my first cycle, and now suddenly, like I get on these meds, and I'm going to get blood drawn every day, and somehow they missed my ovulation.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking like, all right, something's off. And then, I think everyone who goes through their own journey, I think we tried it like 2 times. And then they were like, at this point, they were like, we might as well do IVF. And my husband and I had a discussion, and he was like, you know what? I went so like batshit crazy on all those hormones. And
Dude,
it
I
really
was
did.
just gonna say,
I was wild. That he was like, I don't want to do that to you, especially, with the way things are. So we're like, let's just take a pause. I think I actually started my management job around the same time. So I'm like, let me focus on work. We'll figure this out later. And I was trying to like, how do I remove more toxins from our system? I started, making my own lotion. I started making more things at home. Not a ton, but just, it was enough. And it was kind of, I think, a start of that exploratory journey. And I think part of me, this was over like probably close to a 10-year period of time for the both of us. And, we decided not to do IVF, and then we decided to try adoption. And that just, we tried 2 different agencies, and that just really didn't work out. And then I think it got to the point where I was like, are we ready to close this chapter? And what I could say though is I think Kundalini made me okay with closing that chapter. Because
hmm.
I do believe that, at least for me originally, like that was part of the check boxes of life. And I think there was something to be said about me having to be okay with not, quote, achieving a previous checkbox in life.
Hmm.
Um, I think in a lot of ways it made our marriage stronger. It gave us space to work through a lot of stuff that happened because let's face it, this does a number on your relationship. And I am actually, in a weird way, sometimes grateful for it because I think if we actually had a child when we were going through all of this, I don't know in the long run how much we would have made it because we would have just been pushing through. We would have been doing the same thing, right? Have the baby, you know what I mean? We keep pushing through, keep working all the time, taking care of the kid, building the family, head down. And I kind of wonder, like, at what point would have been when? At what point we would have worked on ourselves? At what point would we have healed our marriage from everything that we went through?
I think everything happens for a reason,
Hmm.
and things happen like they're supposed to. You know, I will say those like IUI meds, especially Clomid, made me fucking crazy.
Yes.
The IVF meds, because I did several rounds of IUI, several rounds of IVF. Um, the IVF meds were like strangely like didn't, but they came with their own sets of challenges. I mean, they still made me hormonal, but Clomid made me like I went in like a dark hole for like
Yeah.
days. And like I've heard of people like their marriages falling apart from from Clomid. And by the way, if you're listening, you're on
Mm.
Clomid 5 days. And it
Yeah, you're
just
not
like,
on there long, but it stays with you.
it's insane. It put me in like a dark hole. Like I was in a dark place. Um, but IVF comes with its own challenges, right? You're still
Oh,
like
yeah.
hormonal mood swings. It's like a physical tax. It's expensive. It's emotional. Like the shots are scary. Like it's surgery. It's it's like
No,
all these steps and waiting.
it's a
It's an
lot.
intense journey. Yeah.
I actually remember seeing a friend of mine after, I can't remember if it was after our first round or our second round, and she told me afterwards because she hugged me and she goes, like she even said, she was like, your body was different. It wasn't fat, it wasn't inflammation. It was just like it like changed. It was only this like gelatinous like blob came over or something. Like
That's
it just
interesting.
she was like, you felt different. And I'm like, I I did feel different. You have no
Yeah.
idea.
You're like, I feel different in more ways than you understand.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, IVF made me, or just all of it made me gain a lot of weight for sure before I even
Oh,
got pregnant. So yeah. Um, yeah. Thanks for sharing your journey though. I appreciate your vulnerability and,
no,
yeah.
thank you for asking. It's one of those topics that we don't talk a lot about. I feel like a lot of people just don't talk about it at all. Um, and I think it's important, you know what I mean? Because it's a tough journey to go to, and people don't talk about how what it even does to not just your body, but also like your relationship, with your partner and with yourself. And, you know, um, there's lots of reasons for marriages to fail. And, we could probably go through the list as long, but, you know, infertility is one of them, even though it's not talked about often.
And the crazy thing is 1 in 8 couples goes through infertility now. Like that's like a
It's a lot.
staggering, which, you know, makes me wonder about like what's in our food and our environment and all of that. But,
Oh,
but that's like a whole other
that's a
podcast.
whole nother topic, but yes.
um, but I do want to, we only have like maybe 5 minutes left, but
Oof.
I did really want to ask you about, you've been learning a lot about quantum physics and about how it relates to and how it explains how the yoga practices work. And you've also related it to your life as a nurse in the change management. So I'd love for you to
Mhm.
just talk a little bit about all of that because I love backing things up with science. You've been great with the science aspect, but I want to hear more about that too.
Oh no, thanks. I really got excited when I kind of figured this out for myself. So, we talk about in Kundalini yoga, and I'm sure other places too, they like talk about manifestation, right? Like, oh, you have this like, you just think of what you want and you bring it down. And it sounds so abstract. But what I thought was very interesting is I feel like quantum physics with the theory of downward causation actually explains how we make changes, or you could even use the word manifestation in our own lives. So I'm going to go through the change management first, and then I'm going to start associating each piece with the 5 stages of the downward causation. So when we're going through any state of change, we first have our pre-contemplation phase, right? We don't even know we have a problem yet. We don't even know we want to change it. It's pre-contemplation. It's not even our thoughts, right? But then you have contemplation where you're like, oh, okay, well, maybe it is time that I do something, but you're not sure what it is yet, or, you're kind of like dabbling, like how to do it. You're not quite there. And then you actually are in the planning phase where you're like, all right, I'm committed to do this. This is what I'm doing. This is what I'm going to get. And this is when I'm going to start. You start planning that phase. And then we go into the action phase where we're actually like doing it. And then finally you get into the maintenance phase where everything's copacetic. And I think there's always, 2 things that we tend to forget about with change management in our society. One, we tend to go straight to the action phase and we kind of forget any sort of planning whatsoever. So we end up forgetting one piece of the phase. The other piece is that we like to think that it's all nice and linear. But in reality, there's a lot of back and forth, right? Like you may start taking action, realize it was wrong. You may have to stop, go back to planning, go back again. A lot of back and forth until you actually hit that maintenance. Um, Now, in the realm of downward causation, we start with the bliss body. And the bliss body is like this great field of information. It's intangible, it's limitless. We can't even comprehend all of it. So I feel like the bliss body is very much in line to pre-contemplation. We're not aware of it, but it's there and it exists. And then underneath the bliss body, it comes down, it's called the supramental body. So the supramental body, it is like this universal knowledge. It's kind of intangible. It's like this divine intelligence. This is like the prayer and the meditation. So I kind of see that could be associated with the contemplation phase. You're not sure how you're going to do anything yet, but that idea is starting to spark that, there's something else out there that you want to change. After supramental goes into like the mental body. So now you're actually like thinking about it. You're assigning meaning to what you're doing. And that is really, I think, the planning stage, because now you're actually like logically putting down, how am I going to do this? And you're trying to get what this actually means to you. But that meaning is really now pulled into that vital body. And the vital body is the energy associated with it, the emotion, what it means to you. And it's that energy in the vital body that is really connected to the meridian system, the chakra system. You could also say our biofield, the electromagnetic field around us. And I feel like that's the action phase. Because when you're making any sort of change or to stick, like, you want to associate this emotion with it for you to be able to keep doing it. And then finally, the last phase is the physical body, right? So at this point, it's come down into matter. The energy from above has circled down to matter. It's very much gotten very grounded in this plane. And at this point, I can see that very much associated with the maintenance phase. And I really was excited when I started learning about this and seeing this, because I feel like it just takes the realm of impossibility or something that's just magic kind of out of the equation. It's like, no, it's not magic. It's literally it's the same process being viewed with two different lenses: a lens of energy and the lens of, logical step-by-step thinking.
Totally. I love that. I feel like you should give a TED talk on that. But it makes sense. And I've said this on the show before. I'll say it again. Like, we live in such an exciting time where science is backing up what mystics and spiritual teachers have been saying, but like also vice versa, like you were just saying, right? And there's a way to look at it through a really grounded, logical lens. And I think it's important that we offer people both, because we're going to get the right brains people with the more mysticism. We're going to get the left brain people with the more logical, but everyone can benefit from these teachings. So yeah, no, I think that's really cool. I like that you figured that out. This has been such a wonderful conversation. I can't believe an hour has flown by so fast, and you were phenomenal. And you obviously know your stuff, and it's so nice to talk to someone with a science background or a medical background, because like, I geek out on the science for the same reason. It's we can ground all these teachings in reality, and it makes it so much more palatable to people. So thank you so much. I'm sure people want to know where they can connect with you, how they can work with you, what your offers are, because I know you do more than nursing. So please go ahead and share with listeners.
Thank you, Kris. It's been a lot of fun talking with you today. So yeah, I have a gift for your guests, and I know that you'll have the links in the show notes, but it's called Kundalini to Calm Anxiety. So a great first step to work with me would be to sign up for that. I will coach you for the first 5 days through your inbox, and I give you a little video and PDF with pretty much the first couple Kundalini practices that I was doing on a daily basis to help me start to shift myself. You can find me on Instagram under coach_Trish Gent. Feel free to reach out and send me a message. I always respond, and I love talking to people. And the other thing is, I actually co-host a podcast called The Wellness Empowerment Project. It is with another nurse that I worked with as a manager, and it's two nurses talking about the art and science of holistic modalities. So take a listen.
Amazing. Thank you so much. So, yes, everything is in the show notes. Head down there. If you're driving, you didn't get a chance to write all that down. And I will see you all next week. Please share this with someone that you think it'll resonate with. Like, comment, share, subscribe, all the things. Turn on notifications. Help spread this goodness out into the world. Have a beautiful rest of your day, everyone.